Whitney Lackenbauer is a professor and Canada Research Chair in Northern Studies at Trent University in Canada, and he joins us now live from Peterborough in Canada. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us here on the program today. Now, just walk us through the significance of the Arctic and why it's particularly important to Russia.
Well, certainly, as the blurb that your viewers just saw indicates, Russia is the largest Arctic power by just about every metric. Number of population, certainly amount of coastline, amount of territory. So this really is considered by Putin to be an area of core national interest to Russia. So as international interest increases and as global tensions and competition heighten, obviously the Arctic is going to be drawn into the conversation.
Right, and the conflict in Ukraine could have repercussions in the Arctic that go way beyond the permafrost study that we saw. What would those repercussions look like?
Well, we've already seen some of the spillover effects of Russia's, brutal invasion of Ukraine into Arctic cooperation. So what we've seen since the end of the Cold War is the Arctic held up as almost an exceptional space for regional cooperation with Russia and the 7 other Arctic states, really working very collaboratively through bodies like the Arctic Council. In light of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, we've seen a pause on Arctic Council activities and also pause on other regional forums in which Russia is involved. So I don't think this means that the likelihood of military conflict in the Arctic has risen relating to Arctic boundaries or resources or environmental change. But clearly the mechanisms that we've relied on for cooperation and relatively easy cooperation over the last 3 decades are now very much cast into question, at least for the short term.
I'm going to get back to that point you just made, but just walk us through some of the operations that Russia is currently conducting in the Arctic.
So Russia, over the last 15 years or so, has invested quite a bit of infrastructure in the Arctic, based more and more assets in the region. This is primarily oriented towards defense of Russian territory and part of its global strategic deterrent. For example, its Northern Fleet based in Murmansk, some of its strategic delivery systems. At the same time, Russia undertakes activities in its Arctic waters, within its Arctic lands, which not only helps to train and prepare soldiers, but also sends strong strategic signals to the West. Mm-hmm. So we see right now exercise cold response playing out in Norway. Again, as we heard from the Norwegian officer, this is primarily defensive in its orientation, but is also NATO's way of signaling back to Russia that we're also prepared.
Right, and experts do worry that poor political cooperation among Arctic nations could see environmentally harmful Russian activities in the region worsen effects of climate change.
I think there are a lot of big questions. That's a really important variable to keep in mind, is as we see sanctions being strengthened, something that I think is very important for the West to do to show that Russia cannot mount such a brutal violation of the rules-based order and international law and get away with it. It does force Russia into the hands of other partners if it's going to move forward with its very ambitious plans for oil and gas and mineral extraction in the Arctic, as the amount of requirement for Russia to double down with some of those partners and expand production in the face of really serious financial and economic woes in light of Western sanctions intensify. This obviously has potential spillover effects in terms of the environment. Mm-hmm. So too would a dramatic escalation in the amount of maritime activity in these sensitive waters.
Okay, Professor Whitney Lackenbauer, it was a pleasure speaking to you here today on the NewsHour. Thank you so much for that insight.